ISIS, ISIL, their rise. Who are these people? What does their rise mean? How did they suddenly burst upon the scene without anybody apparently noticing?
Well, they haven't suddenly burst upon the scene. The fact of the matter is that although we use convenient labels like ISIS or other labels to describe the various militias that have become active after 2011, after the so-called liberation of Libya, the reality is that these are very fluid concepts, that individuals flow between these organizations. They collect money and arms from one organization and move over to the other. What the ISI is actually is a collection of individuals that enter into one of these so-called moderate organizations. They collect money from Qatar, from Turkey, from Saudi Arabia, from Kuwait, from elements in the UAE, then I'm sorry to say from countries like France, and they get a lot of assistance, technical and otherwise, from the United States, from Britain, and from other West European and Western powers. And then once they have the training, once they have the money, once they have the equipment and know how to use them, they switch to the ISIS. So this entire concept
of infiltration.
The fact of the matter is this entire concept of a moderate or armed opposition is rubbish. And I have got my sources directly in the field there. The individuals who are there in the field, and the information that is there from them is that these people have got a clear tactic now of collecting money, weapons and training from organization X and then joining the hardline organizations to which they have been committed from the very beginning. So arms going for the sake of armed struggle, any kind of arms, weapons and training and cash going to armed and violent groups is finally going to land up in these Wahhabi organizations. This is an elementary lesson that I'm sorry to say the United States, for example, or the United Kingdom has yet to learn.
If these are people with an agenda, what agenda is this? Is this a extremist mercenary agenda? Is it strictly a Wahhabi agenda? Is it a Sunni agenda against the Shias?
Well, the fact of the matter is that you've got different layers of individuals who are parts of these extremist organizations. Some of them are psychologically disaffected and psychologically alienated. In fact, the people who come from Western countries would be seen as psychologically alienated or disaffected. They have an immense guilt complex because in the West, they have had a lifestyle very similar to others in the West. They have partaken of what they call forbidden pleasures. Now, they have been indoctrinated by Wahhabi preachers that the only way to enter heaven is to get forgiveness for these pleasures of the ordinary life. And forgiveness comes through death, killing and murder. That is what Wahhabi preachers tell them. So the more sins, quote unquote, you commit when you're in Britain or France or Germany or the United States, the more people you have to kill in other locations in order to ensure that you get a safe entry into heaven. What Wahhabi preachers say is that don't look at your life on earth. Look at the eternal paradise that is waiting for you. Prepare for that paradise, and the keys to that paradise basically lie in killing as many people as possible whom the Wahhabi preachers tell you to kill.
The sight of the ISIL killing the Iraqi military just at point blank range and saying the sacred words of Allah was really deeply disturbing. How do you see this spreading? Because clearly you're right. It is guiltless. It is as if they are doing a sacred duty. How do you see this spreading now? It's come from Libya, Syria, Iraq, Afghanistan, Pakistan. It is at our doorstep. Iran is in the middle as a sort of oasis that is stopping this. Is it infiltrating Iran? It's a Shia country. Of course they want to go after them. Or is it a question of encircling Iran and also attacking India?
Well, Manjeet, I'm sure you'll notice that from 2011 onwards, ever since the operation against Muammar Gaddafi was launched, I have forecast explicitly in writing that this is exactly what is going to happen. You're arming groups that are going to be totally out of control and that are going to be much more destructive than the groups that committed 9/11.
That's right. So you called it the Wahhabi winter. From the Arab Spring to the Wahhabi winter.
I very early on said this is a Wahhabi winter and that Wahhabis are taking advantage of this kind of thing. The reality of the situation, quite frankly, is that so far as the battlefield is concerned, so far as this killing and mass murder is concerned, the one good effect of this, if I may say so, is the fact that the Iraqi army now understands what it's up against. Unfortunately, what happened was the ISIS fighters in their march to Baghdad used the same tactics the Taliban did in their march to Kabul. They bribed commanders of the conventional armies. Let's not forget, the Taliban entered Kabul on the back of cash, not on the back of military success or military force. The ISIS entered the places like Tikrit and Mosul not because they were militarily better, but because they bribed certain key commanders in the Iraqi army to defect. Many of these commanders, frankly, are commanders who were forced by NATO countries to enter into the highest ranks of the Iraqi army. The Iraqi administration did not want them, but the Americans, the British, the French, they forced them into the Iraqi army, and it is these commanders who were forced by NATO to, were forced on the Iraqi administration by NATO to join the Iraqi army, who have taken the money and vanished. Now in Taliban, if you remember, the United States funded a large section of Taliban. I mean, Robin Raphael, the Assistant Secretary of State, was a fairy godmother to Taliban. The Clinton, if you ask me, the Clinton administration did more for the Taliban before it came to power than Benazir Bhutto did. But of course, the Mr. Clinton administration escaped all the blame. In the same way, what is happening here is that this kind of situation has happened in which the Iraqi state, by listening too much to NATO, has weakened itself. And now what does NATO want? It wants the Iraqi state to listen to more of this kind of toxic advice and completely destroy its offensive capabilities. My own view is that this pressure on the Iraqi state, which is a democratically elected state, is going to lead that state to turn to Iran, to turn to Russia, to turn to China, and I hope sometime to India, and abandon the US and the European Union. And these countries, that is China, Russia, Iran, and possibly India, are going to move in and help them to militarily defeat these forces.
So you mean to say that we will be compelled to send a military, or will we be advising them on tactics?
The fact of the matter is, Manjeet, that the Wahhabi International is a global menace. Unfortunately, Western countries don't see it in that light because they have been playing footsie with Wahhabis for a very long time. We have seen for more than a century. They first used them against the Turks, then they used them against nationalist Arabs like Nasser, then they used them against the Soviet Union, and then they started using them against people whom they didn't like. I mean, like Muammar Gaddafi or Bashar Assad, and of course that hapless Hosni Mubarak, who somehow they got fed up of. So they've been using Wahhabis for a long time. They don't realize Wahhabism is a cancer on the globe. It is metastasizing across the globe. We are talking in terms of the Wahhabis as being limited to the Middle East. Sorry, Wahhabism is in every major city in India and the United States. Wahhabism is in every major city in Europe. It is a cancer that has entered the heart of the globe, the heart of urban cities and urban centers across the globe. And every country has an obligation to fight it. Unfortunately, it's still going to take a while. I think it's going to take some more shocks. If even 9/11 could not, make the United States abandon its love affair for Wahhabism, my fear is something much worse than 9/11 is going to take place. But hopefully, by that time, they will come to their senses and understand the entire world must confront Wahhabism.
So, which is the Wahhabi corridor in India?
I would like to say I wish it were a corridor, because then it could be identified, it could be sanitized, it could be dealt with. The Wahhabism is a virus which is there across India in various forms. And the problem with this virus is that it's like cancer. When a cancer cell metastasizes to some other part of the body, it grows, it spreads to other cells. When this Wahhabi ideology goes to different parts of the country, it metastasizes, it spreads among the population. And the problem is the Wahhabi ideology. We have got to ensure that the Wahhabi ideology is delegitimized. Now today, for example, the BBC, CNN, Al Jazeera, all these channels are talking about the Sunni revolt against the Iraqi government. For heaven's sake, The Iraqi government is about 40% Sunni in the composition of its ministers. Several of the key officials are Sunni. These are not Sunnis fighting the Iraqi government. This is not a Sunni-Shia conflict. It's a Wahhabi-Shia conflict, and we have to separate the Sunni from the Wahhabi. If you don't do so, what you're doing is bunching all the Sunnis together and enabling the Wahhabis to pose as Sunnis and thereby get more converts into them. It has got to be made very clear. Theologically, I've studied Wahhabism. Wahhabism has nothing in common with Islam. Islam is a faith that preaches mercy, compassion, tolerance, beneficence. It's, if I may say so, it's an admirable and very, very noble faith. And Wahhabism has nothing to do with it. But unfortunately, if you go to America, you say Wahhabism is a pure form of Islam. You go to the international channels, they talk about Sunnis in revolt. These are not Sunnis. These are about 5% of the Sunni population, and this 5% has been masquerading with the help of mass media, with the help of, frankly, the geopolitical and strategic so-called experts in NATO bloc countries. They have been masquerading as the whole. This 5% as we expose what it is, a cancerous growth on the Ummah, a cancerous growth that has got to be removed.